also, the different kinds of grips, the different kinds of breaking balls that we've had in our program over the years that have been very good. They've been professional, breaking balls that our guys have developed, so I'll try to go through as much of that, and I hope we got time for, a couple of questions, okay? In terms of what we look for, arm action is really important. I think earlier Coach Lefevre was talking about, the Ferris wheel. And that's probably, the best arm action, whether it's an infielder, outfielder, or a pitcher. For me, it's really important because it really, when the arm action changes on a breaking ball for a young pitcher, it most likely means that his posture is going to change as well, and that he's thinking very differently about his breaking pitch. So when I go out and recruit, what I recruit is an arm action that mimics fastball, the same as his fastball. And if he's gonna break his hand somewhere different, okay, if he's gonna create different angles, if he's gonna tilt shoulders, he's probably not probably a curveball guy, which is most young kids like to throw. So let me show you a couple of those. This young man is Keith Cantwell from Monmouth Regional, an All Big East pitcher. Came in with one of those slurs, a high school, good breaking ball in high school, very competitive kid. Pitched in the Arizona Diamondbacks after his Seton Hall career. As you can see, it's down, out, up, out in front, and if you want to show we're pretty square. That's pretty much on target and going to the target. So his shoulders aren't affected by breaking ball. So what I mean when the shoulders change and the posture changes, you think about a lot of young kids that throw a curveball and they're taught to throw a 12 to 6 kind of curveball. A lot of young kids start to think that they need to be at 12 o'clock in order to throw a curveball. And because of that, what happens is they start, now the fastball posture out in front now looks like this on a curveball because they feel they need to get that this is 12 o'clock. So what we look for is that good clean arm action out, back, and up, very similar to fastball, okay, with late turn in the hand. And that's what I look for, and that's what we teach. You can see these two. This is a young man, Sean Black, nearby, a Lenape high school kid, and Joe DeRocco here. A little bit different. There's a slight tilt, a lot more tilt in Sean on the right here, and your left, or is your right. He was more of a slider guy. Joe DeRocco, on the left, learned to do both. He came in with a good curveball, okay, and became better, but also learned to throw a slider as well. He actually became a 4-pitch pitcher. He's currently in the Seattle Mariners organization. So you can see pretty square with the shoulders, just a slight tilt. Now, when you look at them, you say, Joey's a high 3/4 release point. Sean was more of a 3/4 release. And again, the release point's really important because it may tell you whether he's going to be a curveball or a slider. And more, quite honestly, there are more right-handed pitchers as well as lefties, but I definitely see more of a right-handed pitchers. They're more slider type of pitchers. More slider, more slurve than they are curveball. It's a lot tougher to master a curveball, a good curveball out in front, okay, at a young age. So this is what we look for. We look to see what happens to the posture, what happens to the shoulders. And again, if you're noticing when you're teaching a breaking ball, if you're noticing that all of a sudden from fastball to breaking ball, this is changing, which is also telling to a hitter, what's happening. Then most likely, if you take a young man who's trying to get a curveball here and then you put him in a fastball posture, what is he? Most likely a 3/4 guy. Now, if he can stay, if he can maintain most likely he's a slider, in a slider slot. And that's really a lot of what I look for. Different lefty. That's a 5'7" lefty on the left side that could not throw a curveball. He was a slider. You could see from the side in his elbow, he's a low, very low 3/4, almost sidearm. Very effective slider from that side. That young man was 5'7", became a 10th round draft choice of the Rockies. He was a walk-on in our program. Talk about him maybe a little bit later in the long toss. This is B.J. Bennick, another Lenape product. One of the best pitchers I've probably coached. Really tough, competitive kid, but he threw a knuckle curve. We're going to go over some grips, but a very different type of knuckle curve. You know, his knuckle curve was four-seam into his knuckles, and it was thrown very hard, about 82, 83 miles per hour. He would often bleed from his knuckles because of it. Very different grip, and today when you hear about a knuckle curve, you hear more about a spike curve or a knuckle that way. Okay, so again, that was a very different grip. I haven't seen it since. I've not seen it since, but very effective. Pitched into AAA in the Chicago Cubs organization. Okay, and kind of somewhat proof that that's Jason Grilli over on the left, the highest pick. He's with the Pirates right now. He was the highest pick ever in the Big East Conference. He was the 4th pick overall, and he came in drafted, and he had a pretty good curveball. Today he throws a slider, a hard slider, power slider. That's Matt Morris, who was more of an infielder or shortstop and did not have much of a breaking ball, but developed an outstanding breaking ball. He was runner-up Cy Young in 2001. So he developed a curveball. That's really rare. That's really rare that at that late you can develop a major league type of curveball. And I'll show you one of his teammates, Adam Wainwright, and some of his grips. Okay, if you see their arm action as well, out in front, the one thing that, you know, what would right away tell you that it's really poor action, arm action, is if the ball and the hand, when you see the back of it, if this hand goes behind the elbow, there's very little chance of having an effective pitch. As a matter of fact, there's very little chance of developing good command and a loose arm. The ball and the hand needs to stay inside the elbow. So as you look back here, as it comes out and it starts to come up, if this hand gets through here, you know, at very best, there's going to be a lot of inconsistency in a breaking ball. But it's also a pretty good recipe for some arm issues as well. So not only do we want it clean, down, out, Ferris wheel type, but also we want that loose, meaning that there's a good bend in that elbow inside this way that protects the elbow, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Okay. Young guys come in, they've never really done much. Program, a lot of people are aware of crossover symmetry and bands and doing all sorts of things to take care of the rotator and the shoulder, but a lot of young kids have no idea how to take care of their elbows. So one of the prerequisites to spinning at Seton Hall and developing a good breaking ball and staying healthy that I mentioned earlier is you've got to take care of the elbow. So part of, as often as we take care of the scap and the rotator, and as often as we're in the weight room working out, we're doing the same thing of taking care of our forearm and our elbow. So you see some of the pretty simple exercises. A lot of times one of the best is removing some of the dumbbells, some of the weight, and working your pronators and supinators that way. That's pretty simple. A lot of the guys like doing the rice bucket as well. look in on any of these on YouTube and so forth. But I like this. This has been around since, as far as I can remember, since the 70s. I think it was made popular not too far from here in Philly with Steve Carlton and Gus Effling, I believe. Okay, so that's something that our guys continue to do. If not, people will tell you, everybody will have elbow trouble at some point or another. We've been really fortunate to really minimize arm issues on campus. We're just trying to get better before they get on campus. So again, just as critical for the shoulder is a good elbow program. Different grips for different breaking balls. Pretty interesting. You can see up top. That's a pretty, right now, it seems to be one of the more popular curveball breaking ball grips. Adam Wainwright has got one of the top breaking balls. I'll show you a couple of slides on them with that one finger above and out. A little easier to command and turn the wrist, but also one reason I really like it is if you're teaching someone a breaking ball, the one reason I really like it is that it's very hard to overthrow. Very hard to overthrow. And that's the key to a good breaking ball. The key to a good breaking ball is unfortunately every young kid wants that, kind of hard slider type of wiffle ball type of breaking ball. And that's really hard on the arm. Number one. Two, it's very hard to develop, very hard to get command of until you're much more mature. That grip can allow a young pitcher to get that four-seam spin, but also it allows him, I guarantee you, it will help him with his posture. He's not going to feel he has to get up here to get that 12 to 6 rotation on his breaking pitch. The other one, the second one you see there is pretty much a traditional breaking pitch grip. And that could be a curveball, just the way that wrist is out in front. The knuckle curve, okay? And now, what do I recommend for our guys? Quite honestly, it's all trial and error. If somebody comes in, if we've recruited a young man that has a good breaking pitch, I'm not going to change that. But if someone is struggling with one, or someone is in between a curveball and a slider, we're going to play around with different grips, 2-seam, 4-seam, and so forth. These are just some of them. Okay, the last one on the bottom is also one of the classic slider grips, so I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Classic left-handed curveball, as you can see, very similar to Seton Hall's Joe DeRocco earlier. You see the shoulders that are tilted. Probably one of the best curveballs ever. Sandy Koufax, one of the best curveballs right now from a left-handed pitcher in Kershaw. Very similar tilt, again, with that curveball. Okay, and that's the lefty. Elbow above shoulder. Okay, and then you see, if you could see behind him, both fingers are on the ball. One of the best curveballs ever by a right-handed pitcher, Bert Blyleven, a Hall of Famer, and so forth. Again, both fingers on the ball. I think Blyleven could spin the ball for a strike anytime. Anytime. I thought it was one of the best I've ever seen. But as you can see, he's a little bit more lower three-quarter. Lower three-quarter. His breaking ball, he had a tendency to make it, if he wanted to sweep it, he could sweep it. If he wanted to be more 12-6, he could do that as well. Notice his shoulders and his posture. They're pretty square to the plate. Okay, this is Adam Wainwright. And from the side view, you could see the arm action when he comes out. You could see his index finger off the ball as well. And you can see as he loads, again, it's staying inside, not outside the elbow. Okay, for good healthy arm action. And And then you can see, especially this position right here, the size of your hand is important. Probably don't talk about that enough sometimes, but the size of your hand is important when it comes to a breaking ball. A lot of curveball guys seem to have a little bigger hand, a lot easier to manipulate the ball. And a lot of guys that are, average to a smaller hand, most likely, most of the time, there's always an exception to the rule, but most guys are slider guys. And that's something else to look at. Because it's very hard with a smaller hand to get over consistently over that baseball and spin and manipulate it. With a curveball, you have to have consistent leverage. And consistent leverage isn't just putting yourself in a position, which it's most of it, but your hand. You got to have a stronger hand, and you got to have stronger fingers over the top of the ball. And that's critical. So I think that's a pretty good image of a good curveball right now. And there's probably a few more like that. And this is from the front. You watch his shoulders, again, not a lot of tilt for him. And that's why I said, if your pitcher is starting to try and learn that breaking ball with that finger here, I don't think he has to feel like he has to get tilted. He can stay in his fastball posture a lot easier. The other thing that's critical, you're talking about not just the spin, but also in terms of a teach, like anything else, it's important that it's out in front. It does not matter what the grip is, it doesn't matter how strong they are, the size of their hand, or anything else, okay, or their posture, if a breaking pitch is thrown behind. If it's thrown from behind, if it's thrown late, it doesn't matter. It's going to be ineffective. They're not going to be able to spin it well, and certainly not going to be able to consistently throw a strike or have effective movement with it. So as we teach, that pitch needs to be out in front as much as possible. And that's a pretty good picture of it. The slider, which is something I'm familiar with, yes. I'll tell you, with the curveball, I want it loose. Yes, absolutely. When I talk more about wrist is right here with the slider. But that's a really good question. So just a really quick story. It's one of the best left-handed sliders ever, and one of the best pitchers ever. And the same thing on the right side. But the reason I have them both up there is I was at Seton Hall after my sophomore year. I was overseas. I was over in Florence, Italy. I'm Italian born, and I was playing baseball in Florence, Italy, my sophomore year of college, having a great time. And I was an average pitcher, I would say, average to good pitcher. But spending that summer, there was a young man that played in the Phillies organization for a lot of years. He was in AAA ball, had a tough time breaking in the big leagues, a left-handed pitcher, who later on went on to become a big league pitching coach. And Chuck Niffen is his name, and Chuck played quite a bit with lefty. So that summer, that sophomore summer, Chuck taught me the slider, taught me a slider grip, but also taught me the importance of being able to throw it out in front, which was something that I certainly didn't put any emphasis on. Anyway, that pitch, 6 months later, just that one adjustment, okay, trying to go from a slurve to more of a slider and keeping my hand and wrist more behind the ball. Well, next spring, next summer.
5 minutes.
I was a 4th-round draft choice because of that pitch, and I was told I had a major league slider. That's really, that's what it took. Sometimes maybe it is that easy, but I spun a lot of balls, prior to that. Smoltz and Leo Mazzoni, conversations with, personal conversations with Leo Mazzoni. I had the pleasure to do that in his home, and he teaches a slider that I think it's a slider I've been teaching, It's the slider that's been getting guys drafted from our program, and it's a slider that's a really tough time on very good hitters because it's tough to pick up spin. So since we don't have much time, that slider grip is no different than the classic, the regular grip that most guys would grab. Okay, more like a two-seam type of grip. Okay, but the way I was taught was to keep it one. Mazzoni says both fingers on the ball, both fingers on the ball, and then we took it and went to four-seam grip. A four-seam grip, which now gives you much more spin, very much like your four-seam fastball. Hitters have a tough time recognizing it. It's smaller, it's harder, and easier to control. It's a lot easier to teach a young man to stay behind the ball like his fastball because that's all he's done all his life. Than to turn it, get the release point, get the right spin. It's just a lot easier. And if you can get that, but I also believe the way Leo teaches it, or taught it, is also a lot better on the arm, a lot easier on the arm. So this is what I teach. You call it T3, you call it whatever you like, but just for simple reasons to try and remember it, it's feeling after that grip, it's the feel of throwing it, throw, and then turn. Not what most young kids do is what? Turn and then throw. So the feel of staying behind the ball, fastball-like, throwing it, turn, and tuck. And the tuck's really important because what that does is it takes away as much strain as you can on the elbow. The biggest culprit in trying to teach a breaking ball is what? A lot of young fellas do what? They hyperextend. They cast the ball this way. One of the biggest problems. Okay? So in learning how to stay fastball, loose arm, fastball grip, out in front, right? Out in front, throw, turn.
2 minutes.
And tuck. And that protects the elbow. It really cushions the elbow from further harm. Okay? Does that make sense, everybody? It sounds simple, okay? But most kids will turn, all right, not get in the right position, and then try and pull. Most will try and get here and feel like they have to pull across to get a good slider. Whereas four-seam grip, okay, fastball-like, getting the message to the posture, stay behind it, stay fastball, stay strong, out in front, throw, turn, and tuck. Okay, and who throws out other than him? Right? There's a great, you should go on YouTube and just look up sports science video of Mariano's cutter. There's a reason nobody else can really do it. Everybody's trying to imitate it. Got a young man right now, and the only problem is he doesn't know when he does it, but he throws a cutter. It's very much like it, believe it or not. And he can throw up to 93, 94 miles an hour. The only problem is he doesn't know he's throwing. When I ask him to throw a cutter, what does he throw? He throws a slider. I ask him to throw a fastball, and half the time he's got a really good cutter. And I'm trying to learn from him, because if I can learn it from him and he can learn it and do it at will, it's a really tremendous pitch. Sports Science on YouTube, Sports Science, Mariano Rivera will give you some insight. But the last thing I would say is this about that.
End of session, 5-minute break.
I'm in the metro area. One thing I always saw Mariano do is when he got in his glove, he'd get the ball back, he would go in his glove, he would turn over and get in position. This is when he was young. I believe this is when it was still something he needed to be conscious of. He would always turn it over, and I think the thumb placement is really important. The thumb needs to be on the inside of that ball.